Hi, this is Johan from Appivo again. Today I am going to show you how to create a basic sensor application. A small IoT application that collects measurements at a set interval and stores them in the database. So let's get started. I'm going to create a small app to begin with. Let's call it sensor data. I will need a data model to store my sensor data in. I will call it sensor value. All right, and the model, as it's pretty simple, will only collect a single metric. We'll call that value, have it be a float, and we'll make that required. Next thing we'll do is we'll create two roles. Our app should have an administrator role. That role should have rights to do everything. So he can create, read, update, and delete sensor values. But we will also create a special role that will assign to the user that the device is running as. We'll call that device. Now the device only needs to be able to create values, so we'll just give it the create privilege, like so. Now it's important that once you're done with the app that you remember to assign the roles to the respective users. We'll create a small interface, a web interface, like so. We will add a view, just one simple view. I'll start from a blank template, and we'll just call it view. And we would like to display our collected values here in a data grid. So let's drag out a data grid. And you see by default, the system chose to connect the grid to the sensor value model that we just created. So we'll leave it at that. We don't need a summary for this table. It won't make much sense to summarize the values, so we'll take that off. As for columns, we have our value that's been selected already, but we'd also like to show the timestamp that the value belongs to. So we'll add this one. We'll change the order, put that first, and change the name, the display name of this to timestamp. All right. Now we have our grid. I'm gonna resize it slightly so that it's a little bit bigger. Okay, nice. And what about adding a label just to tell what this is really about? So we'll say sensor values, and maybe we'll make that a little bit bigger. So, all right, that's good. And how about adding a button so that we can refresh the data grid? Try that out, place it here, and call it refresh. All right, so how do we refresh the grid? Well, first let's check what name this data grid has. Well, the widget ID here is datagrid 0_0, so that's good to remember. We'll do this. We want clicking on the button to refresh the grid. So we'll do this. We'll add a small script. We'll choose JavaScript. So first I need to get the widget, the data grid widget. So I'll do context get widget data grid 0. And then I can do grid.refresh. That ought to do it. That's all. Okay. And that's pretty much it for our UI. It shouldn't be more complicated than that. Moving on to our IoT code. Now we want to create a device profile for, it can just be called device, that's fine, that collects measurements from a sensor at a set interval. So we'll create a timer. We'll call the timer measure, and we'll let it run every 5 seconds. This is in milliseconds, so 5,000 milliseconds. Okay, Step back here, we see that we got a new event, timer measure tick. So this event will be emitted every 5,000 milliseconds. We'll create some code here. So now we would likely have created a function here for integrating with our actual hardware sensor if we had one. We don't in this case, so we're just going to make something up. We'll say var value equals math random times 100, so 1,000. So we'll get a randomized value between 0 and 100. Now we need to create a record to store in the database here. So we can do context, create record, and we need to tell the system what model we want to create a record of. And our model was called sensor value. And then we need to tell the system what data we want to put in that record. So we only gave our model one single attribute called value. And we want to populate that with the value that we just collected from our fake sensor up here. So now we have our record object, and now we'd like to store that in the database. So we can just do context dot create dot record. And that's it. That's all you need to do to actually get your data to flow back up into the cloud. All right, I'll save. So our sensor app is actually pretty much done now. The only thing we need to remember at this stage is that we need to assign the user roles. Now, the admin role, if we look back here, we see the admin role was chosen as the default role. When an application is being saved for the first time, the developer himself will be assigned the default role. So our user, which is system up here, will already have this role. The device, however, will need to be assigned its role. And you should know which user you used when you provisioned your device. In my case, I was using the same user system here as I'm logged on as right now. So I won't have to do anything else, but you would likely have to assign the device role to your device user. So after that, the last part I need to do is, well, we can first take a look at the devices. See, I have one single device here. It's online. It's called Raspberry Pi. It's tagged with home and test. So now I need to assign this new application that we just created to the device. And we do that by going to the marketplace, scrolling down, and this is my app, sensor data. And I go to assign devices. I enable this device profile that we just called device, and I need to give it a few tags here now. I remember that my device was tagged with home and test, so this is enough to target the device. I will save, like so, go back, and now we can run our application. All right, we can see that our device already started collecting metrics. And now if I hit refresh, see we got one more. Hit refresh, I got one more. So they keep coming every 5 seconds. See, 8 to 33, 58, 53, 48, 43. So they just keep coming. So that's pretty much all, folks. We created a very simple sensor application. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye-bye.